Channing, can you tell us a bit about who you are and about what inspired you and your wife to put together the Parkville March for Unity?
Definitely. So, Channing Dawes, my wife and I, we have 3 kids, 2 girls, 1 boy. Live in Wrist Lake. We moved into Parkville in 2016. So we've been here for right around 4 years. It's been okay so far. We decided to invest in Parkville in 2017. We opened up a small business, Pop Culture Gourmet Popcorn. We sold that in November of 2019. I work in IT consulting. My wife is an attorney. And the reason we decided to organize the march is that we saw some things happening here in Parkville that we didn't like. And mostly within our neighborhood, of Wrist Lake. And it wasn't so much, actionable items. It was just words that were spoken that we said, you know what, we have to change this. So the unfortunate death of George Floyd, we all know about that, and the circumstances around that and all the marches and protests that were being held. But, while the marches were going on the plaza, a gentleman within the page said, something to the extent of, these aren't his exact words, but, if those protesters or marchers come to Wrist Lake, we're going to have a problem. What do you mean? Like, we're already here, We're marching, we're going down there to march. Right. But, okay, we're going to come to Parkville. And so my wife and I, we got together, organized the march within 10 days, had about between 500 and 700 people. It was awesome. It was something good for Parkville to see that, hey, not everyone here, condones these types of actions. Yeah. Not everyone here, is quiet on racism, whether it's, a one-time thing or systematic racism.
Yeah.
And just to say, hey, the theme of our march was, come together. It wasn't about being anti-police. It wasn't about defunding the police.
Right.
Parkville Police Department was awesome during the entire process. Chief Chrisman, Captain Jordan, we couldn't have gotten any better help. And just to show you the difference, a lady who attended our march wanted to do the exact same march in Weston. It did not happen. And it didn't happen because of the police in Weston. It didn't happen because there were, some militia, so whatever, saying like, we're going to be down there with our guns and all of that. And, it's kind of one of those things, what is it worth it? Well, we also got some pushback when people heard about the march, and, they called Chief Chrisman, and he said, hey, that's their First Amendment. And he marched right there with us. He was
right there up front.
Right there with us up front. I don't feel like he was up there with us up front to, keep an eye. I think that's just a police officer's natural instinct. But he, during the whole entire process, expressed that he wanted to make sure that we could make the difference and the change, whether it's for one day or whether we carry this forward. My intent and my wife's intent is to provide a safer place for my kids to grow up, for kids that look like my kids, and those that feel like they do not belong.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I belong in Wrist Lake. I get tired of bringing up, racist thing that people do in Wrist Lake.
Yeah.
And, people are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about it. Oh, really? Imagine if you're tired of experiencing it. So that's why we chose to do the march. That's why we felt like it was important. We felt like it was successful, and we want to keep this going. We don't just want it to end here. So I've seen a lot of great groups form. Alderman Walsmer, Brian Whitley, they're making changes, they're doing things. We just have to make sure we keep this ball going so that, we can have equality. People look at Black Lives Matters and they throw out, terrorist group and this and that. You're gonna have some buttholes on all facets of any and everything you try to look at. You're gonna have bad cops. You're gonna have bad people. You're gonna have people who infiltrate and, you know, try to de-escalate and make those people look better. But the whole Black Lives Matter movement that's all it is. It matters. I don't want anything. I don't want a handout. I don't want any reparations. I don't want a subsidized check. I just want to matter.
Amen.
That's it.
Yeah.
I want my life when I walk out of this church to be as valuable as your life when you walk out of this church.
Yeah.
I want Mr. Blake, who got shot in the back 7 times the other day, to have been given the same benefit of the doubt as any white man who would have been
Who would have walked to
encountered
his car.
and would have probably been tased.
Yeah.
So why am I as a black man looked at as though the worst thing is going to happen versus not being given that benefit of the doubt?
Absolutely.
So
It's very well said. Thank you for
Thanks.
sharing that. One thing I find myself curious about, I think to see 500 to 700 people participate in a political event in Parkville was definitely a surprise to me. I wonder if it was a surprise to you all as well. When you started to organize, did you expect the event to be that big? And what were some of the responses that you got?
it was very, very surprising. I did not think that we could pull this off in a week. I would say a lot of the momentum kind of piggybacked off of Kansas City's and the surrounding cities. And, you know, we also made sure that we let people know that we weren't going to tolerate any craziness, you know, and that we also, it was not about the police. You know, a lot of the actions that come out of the rioting and the looting and things like that are frustrations against the police. I don't condone the rioting. I don't agree with it. It's the worst thing. You know, I had a small business in Parkville. Had I done that protest and been some rioting and looting, my small business probably would have been impacted.
Right.
Not acceptable on any level.
Right.
But what I will say is that we wanted to make sure that we let people know that this was a family-friendly event. We were going to march this, you know, 1.5 miles. We were going to have police escorts, and that we were not going to tolerate any foolishness.
Fair enough.
And it was very surprisingly to see the amount of people. But what was more surprising than to see the amount of people is that to see the amount of people of different races that were there. There were more white people there than black people. There were a lot more kids there than I thought would be there.
That was one.
And, you know, Platte County sheriffs handing out ice cream to kids, just having that positive interaction. You know, a lot of the interaction that people get with police officers always bad. I got a ticket a couple weeks ago because I was speeding. That's a negative interaction. It was a positive experience. Nothing bad happened. Here's my license. There you go. But it's a negative interaction because it's, you know, it's bad to get us in trouble.
Right.
You know, but I was very, very pleased by the turnout. I was pleased by the actions of Platte County sheriffs, Parkville Police Department, and everyone who came.
Wonderful. And another thing I was curious about, you said a few minutes ago that there's been some response from local government, from one of the aldermen, of some changes that are being proposed and
Yes.
talked about. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so Alderman Wasserman, I may be butchering his name, I'm sorry, but he has an initiative where he's assessing diversity within Parkville. And part of that, just like throughout the rest of the country, you know, you have these monuments, statutes, just, you know, items that are memorializing the times where segregation was, you know, a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, we have 3 or 4 here in Parkville, if not more. And so we're having those discussions, and he's taking those discussions and frustrations to the city and saying, hey, you know, why is there a sign in downtown Parkville that says that right here, the very first thing was slave tobacco and, you know, trade? You know, is it important? Yes. However, when
Can we contextualize it in a different way?
right. You know, when my daughter sees that, how is she supposed to look at it? When my son sees that, like, well, man, they did this right here in Parkville. You know, I thought this was only done in the South. Well, a lot of people call Missouri the Midwest. Missouri is the South.
Yeah,
Missouri is as south as you can get. I'm from Arkansas, and it's no different. You know, it's just geographically in the middle. However, I've experienced just as much discrimination here as I have, you know, growing up as a kid.
Okay.
A lot of that is because I'm exposed a lot more, so I put myself out there a lot more. However, you know, I haven't let that stop me being who I am.
Right on. Well, I think that's a great segue to my next question, which is, can you speak a bit to some of the experiences that you and your family have had with police, positive and
Yeah,
negative,
definitely.
but also your experiences with discrimination more broadly?
Yeah. So I can talk about it in a couple different facets, and I may go back and forth. But you know, growing up in Arkansas, this was around. So I was born in '79. So around 84, 85, 83 through 85, the school districts there came up with an initiative to segregate the schools more. And part of that was busing us about 40 minutes away. So we were going to a school district in Little Rock. It was Little Rock School District, and then you have Pulaski County School District. It's kind of like Parkville, and then you have Platte County. So we would go to those schools, and starting in the second grade, and I will say that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right on.
As a young man, as a black grown man now, that was the best thing that had ever happened to me, because it exposed me to other races, and it also gave me a better education. Hence is why I live here in Parkville.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we can afford to live pretty much anywhere in Kansas City if we wanted to. We could live in downtown Kansas City, but do you want to pay $26,000 to go to private school, or do you want to send your kid to, you know, Central in Kansas City? Neither. So we choose to live here because of the education that my kids can get. However, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the worst thing that ever happened to me, because a lot of the white kids, a lot of us, we were all kids at the time, so I'm not blaming them for their thoughts or belief, and I'm not crediting us for our thoughts or belief, but you know, whenever we got in about the 7th, 8th grade, you know, we would have racial fights because, you know, they would, you know, call us this, we would call them that, we would pick on them, they would pick on us, and it's really, really unfortunate to say this, but that's just the way it was, you know.
Yeah, this would have been right around 1995.
Exactly.
Which I think would surprise people to
Yes.
hear.
And we would then go to football practice and be okay. You know, we would have a racial fight in the morning and go to football practice. And, you know, the problem with that is that our parents, my parents, and I'm assuming their parents, you know, a lot of that was passed down to us, that like you don't trust white people. You don't, you know, hey, you know, black people are this, black people are that, white people are this, white people are that. You kind of got to grow up to get the, you know, learn on your own.
Yeah.
Don't feed into those negative stereotypes. So, you know, that happened, and you know, graduating college or graduating high school, going to college, never really experienced a lot of racism in college. You know, maybe a couple times about a campus police who would stop us, not knowing if we were on campus or not knowing if we were students of the campus. However, they did that to everyone. However, it was a lot more intense with us, where we would get pulled out of the car, sat on the curb, cuffed while they searched the car illegally. We would say, you don't have permission. Well, I don't have to have your permission. You're on the university's property. Like, your rights don't stop just because you know, came through the gates. You know, I remember playing football or baseball in high school and college, and you know, guys riding by on the truck with a Confederate flag, you know, flipping me the bird and calling me the N-word, and you know, the opposing coaches coming up to me afterwards saying, you know, I'm so sorry, you know, you shouldn't have to deal with that, you know. So those are kind of like one-off cases, but for me, it's more systematic
Okay.
issues that are the problem. You know, I'll say this, and a lot of people will not understand this. Some people will get it, but the greatest thing my mom ever did for me, outside of loving me, caring for me, raising me, and also to mention that, like, I lost my mom at 19, so I was pretty much on my own then.
Wow.
After my freshman year of college. But the greatest thing, one of the greatest gifts she ever gave me was my name, as being Channing.
Okay.
And a lot of white people won't understand that. And what I mean by that is that it got me in the door.
People see your resume.
People
and they
see my
don't
resume.
Make a racial association with that name.
And it got me in the door. And once it got me in the door, it was then my job to, seal the deal. And that's what we want as a group of people. We just want to get in the door.
Yeah.
We just want to matter. And it correlates so well where it opened up so many opportunities for me. There's not a lot of young African American men who would have been able to overcome that. However, I had a great family. I had, great sisters, and my dad really wasn't in my life, but just getting that opportunity and being able to fight that systematic racism is, part of it. Whether it's been in jobs, corporate America, funny story. So I was working in Memphis for a company, and there was a white guy who was my peer. His name was Tyrone.
Okay.
Clearly my name is Channing.
Yeah.
So we walk in the room, and they say, "Oh, you must be Tyrone." That's not that it's anything racial, but people associate that name.
Right.
It would be like if a black lady, who's named Keisha, and a white lady named Sharon, they both walk in the room. It would probably be the same assumption.
Right.
So, things like that. I mean, that's funny. But deep down in somewhere, there's some judgment. There may be some deeper issues. Do not know that for sure, but that's just my assumption. So, fast forward to today, I've had encounters with police. I had great encounters with police. I've had bad encounters with police. Like I said, whenever we met about a month and a half ago, ask yourself, do you want to be a black man? And if you say no, then write down why and work on that why. Do you want to be a black man getting stopped by the police, or would you rather be a white man getting stopped by the police?
Yeah.
Why? Okay, you've acknowledged that there's a problem. Okay, is the problem the black man, or is the problem the police stopping the black man, or is the problem the police thinks there may be a problem with the black man, or is the problem what you see in media, or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
But just think about that and write that down.
Yeah.
I've had encounters where I've been pulled over for not having my front license plate on. 30 minutes later, they're searching my car for not having my front license plate on it. In Missouri, being pulled over, or it happened in Missouri, Southwest Missouri, with a state trooper. As I was working in Tennessee, I would drive back and forth, so I took my front license plate off and put like a Arkansas Razorback license plate on there. Okay, that's fine. I acknowledge I broke the law. I supposed to have a front license plate on. Has nothing to do with you searching my car.
Right.
I recall times not as a kid, but as a teenager, riding in the car with my 4 best friends to this day, being yanked out of the car, sitting on the curb, and them questioning us for up to an hour, accusing us of, selling drugs. Where are the drugs at? Who's your guy? All of this and that. So, as an adult, whenever I get stopped by the police, here you go. Here's my license, here's my registration, hands, all of that.
You can be as polite and compliant as possible.
Yes.
And yet you still might be subject to a search because someone looks at you and they make an assumption.
Exactly. And, as a African American man, I don't have the luxury, similar to the guys on Cop Watch and on YouTube, saying, well, I'm not giving you my license, I was doing nothing wrong.
Right.
I want to go home. I'll take your ticket. My wife's an attorney. She'll probably be able to fix it. I just want to go home. I'm not trying to prove a, you know, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, whatever point here.
Yeah.
My job as a black man is to survive this stop.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all I want to do. You know, and I can tell you about a encounter we just had recently in Wrist Lake where my daughter and nanny, they're on a golf cart, on our golf cart that we own, that's registered, has the numbers on it, has a flag on it, everything. They're driving back from the lake. A guy starts following them. Guy from the neighborhood starts following. That gentleman went around him. She got scared. She called my wife. My wife, you know, freaked out, came downstairs to get me. I come out of the house. So on the golf cart is a young teenage girl.
This is the nanny.
Who's the nanny.
Yeah.
She's 15 years old. My 5-year-old is on the back. My 10-year-old's on the back, and my 8-year-old's in the front seat.
Okay.
The guy's following them. Like slowly, they pull into a pool. He stops. He asked her name. She clearly wouldn't tell him her name. He continued to follow him. They get home, and you know, my wife, you know, is talking to the guy. Because I went looking for him in my truck. I pull back up, and you know, the guy used some profanity and said, "Well, if you shut up, I can tell you what the little B word did."
Wow.
About a 15-year-old.
This is in front of your kids.
Right in front of my kids, right in front of me.
Yeah.
And honestly, it took everything, including the grace of God, for me not to yank the guy out of the truck for talking to my wife that way. But for two, calling a 15-year-old the B word, you know, that's just unacceptable. And you know, we post this in the neighborhood, just say, hey, FYI, this is what happened to us. FYI, this isn't acceptable. People were not focusing on the fact that this guy who's 60 plus years old was following these kids. They're focusing on the fact that, oh, well, all you guys do is talk about how this has, you know, racism and race and this and that. Like, can we acknowledge the elephant in the room that what this guy did was wrong, that you don't follow 4 kids in this day and age when there's kidnapping, child predators out there,
Right.
you know, like that's the problem. If he has a problem with the way she was driving, or if he thought she was driving too slow or too erratically, he could have took down the plate that's on the back, called the Parkville Police, 311, hey, this car was here on this day at this time, they were driving erratically, and report it.
Yeah.
However, he comes to my house, is talking that way to my wife, about a 15-year-old, talking that way to me once I got out because we had some words.
Yeah.
The police lady comes, and she doesn't even really acknowledge the problem. She says, well, I could cite her, I could do this. So now we're there. So you're not there to take care of the problem. You're there to figure out a way for
Who needs to get punished and how.
who needs to get punished and how, and what you do have the power to do. Another police officer came on Friday with the city of Parkville, and was awesome. He wanted to see the girls because he know us personally. He wanted to see the girls. He wanted to check on us. He wanted to make sure that they were okay because he saw it as important enough that these girls need to know that their encounters with the police are not going to be like this every time. So he hugged them. He, you know, said, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. This is not your fault. My daughters didn't even want to go outside for like the whole weekend because of what this guy did. They're still scared to go outside.
Wow.
They don't want to go around the corner to see their friends who live by this guy. And this so much it doesn't have anything to do with race because I don't even know his racial whatever. I don't know anything that was going through his mind.
Right.
But what it does have to do is just human decency. And that human decency is how we get rid of any and all problems that we have with race. You know, so him doing that was just, you know, was just really egregious.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of times when racism happens in our society, there's a sort of plausible deniability to it.
Yes.
Like it's such a small enough incident that folks can say, oh, the police would have treated any motorist that way.
Yes.
Or that neighbor would have treated anyone driving that golf
Right.
cart that way. There's always this sort of plausible deniability for each and every individual incident. But when you go through a lifetime experiencing those each and every individual incident, you start to see the patterns and you start to see how.
Oh yeah, I see it, experience it all the time. I can give you an example that I was mentioning earlier. Is someone wrote on the basketball courts, White Lives Matter.
In Wrist Lake.
In Wrist Lake. So that's clearly intentional. You're clearly kind of mocking the movement. You clearly want to make a statement, and you sought to deface property in order to get that statement out. Young lady within the neighborhood posted on Wrist Lake page, hey, this is inappropriate. It's not acceptable. We need to fix this. I never saw the original post. Full disclosure, apparently there were some words going back and forth. The moderator of the page deleted it. Another lady posted it and said, you shouldn't delete posts like this. Like, this is important. So my response was, if you can't see it, then it didn't happen. And that's what I took from the deletion of the post. Because the lady later posted the original post, and the words going back and forth really wasn't anything wrong with it. It was more concern and more kind of like venting their frustration. But they do not want anyone to see the racial things that go on in Wrist Lake, because if you don't see it, you don't happen. If you don't hear it, it doesn't happen. However, I complained to the moderator of the page, hey, this is not cool. But they send me a private message and say, well, I see your kids playing all the time. These other families, they're really nice to your kids and they play with your kids. As though that's okay. You want to pop a balloon? Because a neighbor's kids play with my black kids as though my black kids have, coronavirus and they're just lucky to be around anyone. No, and I told them, I said, you clearly do not get it. Like, kids are the least racist people you'll ever find in your life, because they just want someone to play with.
Yeah.
They're taught this. Yeah. And you would think someone who has a kid that has a disability would understand the movement more than, it's very similar to someone who has a brown kid, because they're gonna be discriminated against. They're gonna be made fun of. A lot more, because kids are cruel also.
Yeah.
So you would think that when someone sees something, an injustice happen, that they would put themselves in the shoes. Instead, they don't want to put themselves in the shoes because mentally they can't handle it. They can, because, well, no, that would never happen to me. Yeah, I know it would never happen to you. That's the point. I don't want it to happen to me either.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
That brings me to my final question,
Yes.
which is the scripture reading that we have as part of our worship service today. I think the big thrust of it is that when there is justice in the world, there can be peace.
Yes.
When things are equitable, when everyone is treated fairly, when we don't have to, hustle over on top of each other to try to get the things that we need, that is when there can be peace in the world. And so I wonder, as we think about racial justice in our society, what will it take for us to get to a place of just peace? What would it look like to have a just peace in our world?
I think, one of the, a really good example of this is whenever there's a killing, and I say killing, murder, I can say, a police shooting, I can say whatever, whichever side you may fall on it, of a young black man, you only see rioting, and you only see looting, and you only see people protest when there's no justice. There was an example of why come people aren't rioting whenever there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but a couple weeks ago got killed by the police, and they immediately charged the police officer. So why come you guys aren't marching and rioting? Because we've gotten justice.
Right.
But why come people are marching and rioting for Breonna Taylor still to this day.
Yeah.
Still to this day, 2.5 months later, because there's been no justice.
Right.
And they're assuming it's gonna go away. And it's not. We're done dealing, and unfortunately, it took George Floyd being lynched on national TV for even black people to say, you know what, like, we're done. Hey, enough. You know, you would have thought it happened after Eric Garner. You would have thought it happened after Trayvon Martin. You would have thought it would have happened after Michael Brown. You know, at what point, you know, what does it take us saying enough? And I think, unfortunately, it was George Floyd to have died for us to say that. You know, unfortunately, it was Breonna Taylor who died for us to say that. So, if we want a world where you don't want to see a lot of looting and people having reason or make it, even looting, no, like I said before, there's no excuse for it. However, people are using that as their excuse to benefit themselves, to say, okay, I'm gonna go get me some because you killed this guy. Stupidest thing in the world. I do not condone it. But if you don't want to see it, then you need to call out the injustices when you see it. Put your son in that person's place. Put your daughter in Sandra Bland's and Breonna Taylor's place. You know, put your child in Trayvon Martin's place. Could you imagine if a little white child got killed by a black man while walking the Quick Trip and had Skittles in his hand? They would have put him under the jail. Just a vigilante, not even just some guy with a gun who wants to play hero. Similar to the guy on the golf cart. That could have ended very badly for both of us. You know? But for what? When it all could have been avoided. So people have to be willing to put themselves in other people's shoes and say, okay, I see this injustice that happened. Do I honestly think this would have happened to a white man who's leaving work, who has a briefcase in his hand, and he's just walking, minding his business, and he doesn't want to listen to the police? You know, and people got to understand, you know, I told Chief Christmas this, is, you know, black men and police officers are very, very similar. We are very, very similar. People automatically assume the worst. You know, if you have an encounter with the police, oh, what are you talking to me for? Like, I don't want to talk to you. You know, black man getting in the elevator with you, like, whoa, why are you in here with me? I don't want you by me. You know, there's a negative connotation. There's negative connotation in the media. There's negative connotation, you know, in our entertainment, in our music, everywhere. You know, police officers are looked at just as bad as black men. The only problem is that they have a government backing them, and all of their wrongs are righted. All of our rights are wrong. So how can we fix that? You know, it's gonna take, you know, unfortunately, it's gonna take a lot of marches and a lot of protests and leaving all the other crap, the looting and, you know, the violence out of it. You know, I saw a story with the young man in Wisconsin where someone threw a brick and hit a police officer in the head, and they were celebrating. Like, no, like, that's not doing anything. Like, stop the stupidness, stop the Molotov cocktails and the, you know, the spray. Like, I should be able to go to a protest with my 8-year-old and not have to worry about anything. However, you're always gonna have a couple people who ruin it. However, just like those couple bad apples, we need to get them out and move them along away from our events and our marches, like we need to do with the police. You know, we need to get the bad ones out. You know, and people make comments, you know, well, if only they would have listened to and respected the police. Who made the police the holy grail of who has to be listened to and respected? They don't.
Well, and I think of, you know, Philando Castile listened to and respected the police, and he still wound up dead.
You know, hey, I can respect you as a man so long as you respect me as a man or a woman or whatever you may be. However, once that stops, then what do you think I'm going to do? You know, the greatest thing ever, not, well, the worst thing ever is, you know, is when whenever you see a police shooting, after they shot him 8 times, they say freeze. Well, what do you think they're gonna do? Well, he wasn't listening to my commands. Yeah, because he's dead. You just killed him. You know, and it's not just, you know, Jacob Blake. You know, it's the young Hispanic man in California who was shot 8 times in the back, who had a licensed firearm, who was just walking away, who wasn't reaching for it, who was actually doing security for the parking lot, who was shot 8 times. Wow. So, you know, we're at a crossroad in our society where either you're going to put your kids, you know, in a position to grow up and accept the differences with them people and acknowledge the difference and want to make that change, or you're going to shelter them and then they're going to be a part of the problem. But being a part of the problem for a lot of these younger kids, younger privileged kids that are growing up, privileged kids that are black and white, is that they're just sheltering themselves for once an opportunity happens, or I'm sorry, not opportunity, but once something bad happens, it's going to shake their world. It's really going to shake their world, and they you know, we have to decide as parents that, you know, it's going to be our generation that, I'm sorry, our kids' generation that changes everything, you know, whether how they look at gender identity, how they look at race, how they look at everything that's going on within the society as far as what they can do to make it better. It's going to be our kids, because our generation is better than our parents.
Yeah.
And that's so good that I can, you know, talk to my kids and say, you know, well, where does she live at? You know, what's her race? And my daughter said, what? That doesn't matter. Amen. You know, like, that's my goal.
Amen.
Is for her to say, oh, Julie's coming over. And me know Julie's coming over. Doesn't matter if Julie is white, black, Mexican. It doesn't matter if Julie's a boy, girl. It doesn't matter if Julie's trans or lesbian or gay. Like, doesn't matter. You know? And although that doesn't matter, as much as that doesn't matter, I want people to see me as a black man that I do matter. Everyone wants to matter. That's it.
Just as much as anybody else.
Just as much as anyone else. I want to be able to walk out of here, have the same benefits as you.
Yeah.
Whether if I get pulled over, or whether if I'm getting on the elevator, or whether I'm walking into CVS. I just want to have the same rights and be given the same benefit of the doubt, and also be looked at as a quality individual, not a threat.
Amen.
I've never been arrested. I'm a good guy.
Yeah.
I invest in Parkville. Like, you see me in my truck. You know, it's so bad, and, you know, you probably can have some people vouch for this, but, you know, I listen to my music while I'm on 64. I turn it down when I go into Wrist Lake. Why do I do that? You know? I do that because I don't want anyone's negative perception of me to affect him. I don't want anyone's negative perception of him to affect me. So I turn it on and I turn it off, you know? I turn on what I want people to see so that it's not going to have a negative impact on my community. When I'm with my buddies, I may wear my hat backwards. Some people find that's threatening. When I go to an interview, I may shave my beard off that I've been growing for the last year, because some people find beards threatening.
I see.
So there's a lot of things that we as African American men and African American people do to appease white people.
Things you think about that I never think about.
1,000%.
Yeah.
I always make sure I hold the door open at Quick Trip, especially for a white woman, because I want her experience to be like, you know what, that was a nice young black man. And maybe if someone else did that 10 times throughout the course of a year for her, that just may slightly change her perception of me. You know?
Yeah.
And that to me is what's important is, you know, I want to help you change, but I don't have time to teach you.
Yeah.
You know, you need to go out and read it on your own. You know, a good book is White Fragility. I think we talked about
Wonderful book.
But yeah, that's, that's just been a kind of like a quick synopsis of, my life, but
Yeah.
that's not it, and that's not all who I am.
Yeah.
I want people to see the best in everyone. So, regardless of what it is, you see
Yeah.
someone on the corner, don't just automatically think negatively. I have to work on that myself also.
Yeah.
See the best in everyone until they give you a reason not to.
Amen.
There's no reason
Yeah.
not to.
I think those are wonderful words, and that'll be the place where we need to end this conversation.
Okay.
I think it could go on for a long
Oh
time.
yeah,
We
I
have
can talk forever.
a lot more fascinating
Yeah.
things to say, but I'm so grateful for your time
No
today.
problem.
Thank you for being part of this. I think where we go from here as a society is that people like me need to educate ourselves
Right.
about the history of race, about where we are today. As you said, each generation gets better and better.
Exactly.
And part of how we do that work is by educating ourselves, learning, and trying to keep doing better.
Right.
So,
Yep.
again, I appreciate your time and thank you for being part of the service.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Amen.
Thanks a lot.